Welcome to week 7 of Ronde and Tiki presented by Superbook. This is actually our 8th episode, but it is week 7 of the NFL season. Ronde, the 72 Miami Dolphins are popping champagne last weekend because there are no more undefeateds. I'm more surprised by the San Francisco 49ers loss because I know how good the Browns defense is, but I still didn't think they'd be able to shut them down. The Jets, I've been watching them all season long. They bend, don't break at the beginning of the games. By the end of the game, they are shutting you completely down. You know Jeff Olbrich, he's done an unbelievable job. But the common denominator is defense is winning in the NFL early in the season, man.
Well, I'll put it this way, because I didn't watch the Jets game, but I did, of course, watch the 49ers-Browns game. And it was the first time all year that I thought Brock Purdy looked mortal. Prior to this game, it was every single week making incredible throws, operating that offense like he's some version of Joe Montana that nobody expected him to be. And for the first time, and I think obviously not having Christian McCaffrey for a while, Deebo Samuel going out later in that game, you could understand why he might struggle a little bit. But look, I give all the credit to Cleveland's defense here because nobody's been able to really neuter Shanahan's offense, and they look neutered in this game. It was the first time where you didn't expect an explosive. And if you watched the first series, you were like, oh, here we go again. Here's Christian McCaffrey on a 30-yard run. Here's a screen for a touchdown. Nobody can stop this 49ers offense. But you mentioned it, man. Defense wins in this league, and it's never pretty. Right, this game was 17-19. Right, it wasn't like it was an explosion of points. It's not like PJ Walker, who started at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns this week, really lit it up. I mean, he had 190 yards and 2 interceptions. So if you're looking for reasons, they're hard to find. You're like, what happened to this potent offense of the 49ers? And to me, it's Brock Purdy came down to earth. He was not good. When he got pressure, he wasn't able to deliver like he had been the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And now all of a sudden, we don't have any more unbeatens. And yes, the Dolphins are probably drinking. But is this the earliest they've popped bubbly? This seems early.
It does feel early, but I think a couple of years ago it went much earlier. The same, the formula you're talking about with the Cleveland Browns is the same thing the Jets are doing. Now, their offense is nothing to write home about. Zach Wilson is still evolving. We've talked about it a lot. They were leaning on Breece Hall. But remember this offseason, we were talking about the Jets defensive front. I mean, everybody was talking about Aaron Rodgers and what he brought to this Jets team. But it's the defensive front. Now, Quinnen Williams is the guy who gets all of the accolades because he's one of the great D tackles in football right now, and he just got paid. But it was those young kids. Jermaine Johnson is all over the place defensively. They forced Jalen Hurts into 3 interceptions. One of them, the last one, was coverage. He got confused, thought it was man coverage. They dropped in. It's kind of something that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers used to do. Right? You think it's man coverage, you drop back into a zone. He just throws it blindly. Interception, sets up the game-winning touchdown for Breece Hall, or ultimately what became the game-winning touchdown. But the other 2 were Jermaine Johnson just hustling his ass off. And this is the mark, to me, of great coaching and great defensive coordinators. So the first one was a screen. Jermaine Johnson's on the right side of the defense. It's a screen the other way. He's just busting his ass to get over there, tips it, picked off. The second one, he's rushing the passer, gets in the face of Jalen Hurts, disrupts it, flips it up in the air, and we get a wahoo interception as Breece Hall intercepts it. His second big play in 2 weeks for this Jets defense, despite Sauce Gardner being out and DJ Reed being out, both with concussions. Interestingly enough, they're both out, so it's a mishmash unit for the Jets secondary. But they play this zone, shell coverage, and they do it so well. So it makes it interchangeable. So when I look at the Jets victory, I'm not looking at like Myles Garrett with the Browns or any of these big time players. I'm thinking system. The system is so well orchestrated and run, it gives the Jets a chance to win each and every week, despite playing some really damn good quarterbacks. I mean, Robert Saleh said something after the game. we've had the gauntlet of the best quarterbacks from Josh Allen to Pat Mahomes, and obviously just recently Jalen Hurts. These are top 5 quarterbacks. And he said it, and I don't know if it's, I mean, it's bulletin board material, but whatever, it's true. He said, we've embarrassed them all. And he's not wrong. 3 touchdowns, 8 interceptions collectively for those 3 great quarterbacks in this league. So defense is finding a way to rise to the top, which is something we haven't seen in a couple years in the NFL.
Well, I would tell you that Jermaine Johnson, because I did Bucs preseason game against the Jets. Jermaine Johnson is that dude. They practiced against him that week. And if there was one guy that flashed, I mean, amongst all those great defensive players on the Jets, he was the flash. He couldn't block him one-on-one. Whenever you sent somebody to him, he had this topsy-turvy spin move, which you see every single week, making tackles foolish with chippers coming at him. He goes inside of them. Look, there's a reason why defenses turn into what we're now talking about, winning games. They're drafted well. Teams that are put together, drafted well, like the Jets, like the 49ers, for argument's sake, what John Lynch is doing there, and what Cleveland has done. They've drafted well on defense, especially up front. There's one thing you can't have enough of in the NFL on defense. Number 1 is pass rushers, and number 2 is corners. Look at all these teams with these great defenses, and look how they're constructed. They're draft pick guys that end up being studs for their football team right now. And in both of these games that we're talking about, of the ones that lost, beat undefeated teams, it's because of how they've drafted on defense. And right now, I wouldn't want to play either one of those teams, because despite what might be limited on offense for both, Cleveland and the Jets, they are without a doubt a team that can win on the other side of the ball.
The funny thing is that we're not even talking about the quarterbacks. It's like when we get to the postseason and the Super Bowl, you need a Hall of Fame level-ish quarterback or someone that's playing that way in order to win the championship. But right now, it seems like defense is prevailing. Speaking of defense, Ronde, I know you watched this game, the Chargers and the Cowboys. It makes me realize that winning in the NFL is never guaranteed, no matter what the expectation is. And the Cowboys showed it last week with their embarrassing loss. And this week, the Chargers do Charger stuff. I mean, I have to start making it a vow. They're chargering it, right? They just find ways to be boneheaded and dumbheaded. And that's coaching, but it's also Justin Herbert, who I want to love. Like, he looks the part, he is the part, but then he just misses things that are so easy, wide open, wide receivers. He just misses. He doesn't, the last interception, his only interception, but the interception that basically sealed the game, he had his running back scot-free, right? They're paying this shell with man underneath. Running back is free. He's lost, and he throws an interception. So it's the boneheadedness of what we think are great quarterbacks that are causing some of these disappointments in the league.
Well, Justin Herbert, I mean, let's be honest, he's immensely talented. He should be considered top quarterbacks in football, but he has incredible throws, and then he has the throws where you can't miss, and he misses. They have great defense at times under Brandon Staley. I mean, we remember when he was the defensive coordinator of the Rams, how good he made that defense. That defense shows up for about half the time for the Chargers. And I don't know if it's personnel-wise, I don't know if it's scheme-wise, but in high-level situations, the Chargers defense fails. I mean, last night, Dak Prescott, Monday Night Football, Dak Prescott has basically the run offense by himself. Dak Prescott, I mean, he's not a scrambling running quarterback, and yet this defense that we expect to be high level under a defensive coach who's he's a talented defensive coach, just giving up continually high pressure situations where they lose. And so to me, it's impossible to trust the Los Angeles Chargers right now. They're 2-3, and guess what? They got to go on the road. They're 5.5-point dogs to Kansas City on the road. It's like, do you believe in them? I mean, eventually they're going to have to win one of these games, and if it doesn't start this week, it becomes one of those questions. is this the right coach? Right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody's going to start asking if they haven't already about the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't know if you watched that game the other night. They had this lady. They kept showing all of her emotions. Did you see that? Or were
Yes,
you in
I
bed?
did see her. Yeah.
I'm like, they showed her like, and then they showed her like elation, and then later they go back. I was like, that's just cruel. Why would you
Yeah.
do that? Why would you
Because
do
that's
that?
I gotta tell you though, it was brilliant because that is actually the emotion of the Charger fan. They captured it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
We're on top of the world to we are the worst team in football. But it brings up a question, Ronde. Who is the best team in football right now? Is there one? Yeah, I'm gonna say Kansas City
Yes.
only because
Well,
they win.
yeah,
Like just
yeah.
even when they're ugly, they win. But
It's
there's
hard.
nobody that's dominant.
Well, I find myself watching Kansas City games, hoping that they win, even when it's ugly, because look. They don't have the talent that they had. Patrick Mahomes is not working with the talent, especially at wide receiver that he's had in the past. Yes, does he have Travis Kelce? Of course, he has some great complementary receivers. He doesn't have one great receiver, and you can
Yeah.
tell that those off-schedule plays that have made him famous in his career, they're not showing up, right? So you kind of root for him, and you say, yeah, they could be the best team. If you ask me, I think it's Miami. I mean, Miami showed me everything I needed to see last week. They played in an obvious trap game last week against the Carolina Panthers, and are losing 14-0.
Mhm.
And you're like, oh, maybe they're like the 49ers ended up being and losing a game they probably should have won. Or maybe they're like the Eagles and lost a game that they maybe should have won. Next thing you know, it's 14-0, and they score 31 unanswered points. And it's that to me that makes them the best team. When you have the ability to step on the gas and do what Miami did last week against a bad team that was obviously trapping them, it shows me they're number one. But it's week 7. Dude, we got 10 more weeks, 11 more
Yeah.
weeks to figure this out. But right now, it's nice to have the conjecture. What is funny is though, this time of year, it's everybody's doing the if the season had ended today uh,
Yeah.
scenarios, and those teams are Kansas City, Miami, Baltimore, Jacksonville in the AFC, and San Francisco, Philly, Detroit, and Tampa in the NFC. You tell me if you think all those are going to be there
Well,
in another.
the only one that I would is Detroit. There's something about
Yeah,
Detroit, and I'm biased just because it's my man Dan Campbell, but they're playing a different level of football, and
right.
it's consistent. And look, they had a letdown loss week 3, I think it was. But other than that, they've rebounded off of that loss, and they've taken care of business each and every week. And you just saw them.
Well,
So
they just beat the crap out of the Bucks, and I'm not talking about like score wise. I'm talking physical. And I put their
yep,
film on a little bit early before this Tampa Bay game, and you saw how physical they played. Their physicality shows up in person. They are. I'm not going to say they're the most talented team on on
no, because they're
on,
not.
on, on paper or whatever, but physically they are committed to beating you up every single week, and that's why they win. That is the reason why they win.
So I want to say Kansas City, but since they lost to Detroit, and I love Dan Campbell, I'm going to say Detroit. That's my
Yeah,
vote for Week 7 best team in the NFL right now. It's going to
I love
change
it.
in like 2 weeks. Who knows?
Yeah,
We got
I'm
best
still
games
sticking.
coming up.
I'm
What's
still
that?
sticking with Miami. I'm still
Well,
sticking with Miami.
it's because you like speed. You like
Right, Florida
explosive.
team. Hey, Florida
Yeah,
team, man. I'm a
yeah.
Florida.
But Devon A. Chan is out, and they didn't miss a beat.
Right. Who
Rondé,
cares?
why bet with the big boys this football season? Instead, try your hand with the local book. Superbook Sports this fall. Superbook Sports is the book next door. Just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now Superbook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager on the same day and use promo code Ronde or Tiki, not Ronde and Ronde or Tiki. So bet with the best and use promo code Ronde or Tiki this football season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome back. Segment 2 of Ronde and Tiki presented by Superbook. Tiki, real quick look back. Game of the week last week. I thought it was the Sunday night football game, Giants and Bills. And before I go deep into this game, because I'm not really going to go deep, I only watched it because I had to. I was not planning on watching this football game because I thought it was going to be a blowout. And then all of a sudden, it likely was the most surprising game of the week. And obviously, having Saquon Barkley back for the New York Giants made a difference. But the Buffalo Bills, for the second week in a row, are struggling on offense. And for me to look back, we'll talk about the Giants real quick because you can't talk about it, but I can talk about the Giants. They're +2 home dogs to the Commanders this week, right? And to me, if Daniel Jones doesn't play, I don't think that this Giants team looks any different. In fact, they looked a little bit better under Tyrod Taylor because how quickly he got the ball out. To me, it's going to be an interesting game for you to call. I can't wait till next week to review this game after you're done calling it. So you can't say a word because we're obviously doing the show.
I can only tell you that we have debated this on WFAN all week, but we've determined that his name is Tyrod.
He says Tyrod.
I know
in the introduction. He says Tyrod. I'm like,
I know.
What does your dad call you? Yeah, what does your mom call you?
It's the same. I had the same issue last week with the Atlanta Falcons because his name is the running back. His name is Bijan, but he says he even says Bijan, and I'm like, okay, what does your mom call you? He's like Bijan, but everybody says Bijan, so I just say my name is Bijan. Except on the pronunciation guide that the Atlanta Falcons put out, that it's his voice saying his name. He says Bijan. So I'm like, what do I call you, dude? So I think I called him 3 different names in the game.
You're guaranteed to be wrong. But anyways, so we're playing this forward. Buffalo's offense, the 8.5 at New England. And so the question I'm asking you, after having watched that Sunday night football game, where Josh Allen struggled for 3 quarters, basically. First time he haven't scored a touchdown or a point, really, in the first half of a game, and who knows how long. Is this a get-right game versus a really wounded and playing poorly New England Patriots team?
The only thing that I worry about with the Buffalo Bills is that sometimes Josh Allen starts to press, and he starts to try to do too much. And we go back to week 1 when they played the New York Jets. That it felt like that. It felt like he was just trying to do anything because he thought he could get away with it. So throwing deep balls into single high coverage, which led to Jordan Whitehead's 2 interceptions. The 3rd interception of Jordan Whitehead, that was just him playing good defense. But the first 2 were basically punt returns. And that's Josh Allen saying, my guy's better than your guy. I'm going to throw this up in the middle of the field. And Stephon Diggs is going to come down with it. I think against the Giants, the Bills offense got exposed a little bit, Ronde, and you have to give a credit where it's due to Wink Martindale. Wink, who is known for bringing tons of pressure from everywhere and throwing different defensive fronts at you and secondary level, dogs and blitzes, played a ton of man coverage, but he didn't bring people. And so he let the front 4 try to get home and said, Josh, if you can find holes to throw it into, good luck. Now, he completed some of those, right? Because, Adoree Jackson can't run deep overs with Stephon Diggs. He's just going to outrun him. But it exposed him a little bit to the decision-making. And at the end of the day, they were able to come back and win this game, but it was just barely, right? The Giants can't score points. If the Giants could score points, I mean, they had end of half situations where they came away with 0 points and they were on the 1-yard line both times. So the Giants had a lot of self-inflicted wounds against the Buffalo Bills. But the bigger story, and you're right, is what's wrong with the Buffalo Bills, right? They're supposed to be one of these top-end offenses, and Josh Allen is supposed to be, one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league, but he doesn't show it every week. The first time, I think in a long time, it feels inconsistent. And I can't put my finger on it exactly. I think maybe it's because their run game, they're trying to do too much and trying to take him out of the run game because they don't want him to get his ass kicked so much. And it's changed the dynamic of the offense. It's changed the off schedule, non-passing game explosives that you used to see in this Bills offense. And they're set in just being a basic offense, and they're not operating well out of that mode.
Well, 2 points. One, Wink Martindale, yes, simplified his defense. Corners didn't travel anymore. They weren't trying to do this matchup nonsense, and you didn't see people running wide open. That was my take on the Giants for the first month of the season. Too many blown assignments, guys not knowing what the hell they're doing. I mean, we watched that film that one time, you and I together. And you're like, what are these guys doing? The ball is getting snapped, and people aren't in position. Like, basic 101 defense stuff. So he simplified it, and then Okereke looked like the defensive player of the year the other night. So I mean, there is that. But to your point, I'm trying to answer the same question about the Buffalo Bills. And 2 weeks ago, when they lost to Jacksonville in London, and obviously there's those circumstances of travel, whatever, no run game. It just did not exist. Against the Giants, at least they had at least a semblance of it in that one drive in the second half with Cook, where that one drive was all runs. And at the end of the day,
14-yard runs in a row.
Right. At the end of the day, I still think they have some heroics out of Josh Allen. I mean, his touchdown, the one touchdown he did throw late in that game, that was Josh Allen heroic throw to a tight end who didn't have a target all season long. So it's still in there. But I think teams have learned that if you take that away and make them try to go the hard way, like that's what we used to always do to explosive teams, go the hard way, to actually turn around, hand the ball off, and try to make it a 15-play drive. And if you lose your patience, and Josh Allen sometimes loses his patience, you're going to find a way to beat him. So, but to answer my question that I ask you, is it a get-right game for the New England against the New England Patriots in New England? And I think it better be. If we're trying to figure out if the Buffalo Bills are that team this year that is gonna compete against the Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, this has to be the week where they start getting it going. I don't think this can last the way that they're playing the last 2 weeks for another month, because then they'll start probably doubting themselves. I don't think they're ready to do that. But New England can't beat anybody. They can't.
Well, here's the thing with New England. I mean, everybody in the NFL, especially in the AFC East, have been waiting for a vulnerable New England Patriots team. They've been waiting for a team that they can just embarrass. And it seems like this is the year for them to do that. I mean, the other teams to do that. And look, I know that Mac Jones has a lot of confidence in himself. The previous 2 games, not last week, but the 2 before that, he got benched for Bailey Zappi twice. And he comes out and he talks about how confident he still is. He still believes in himself. And I get it. I understand it. The talent is not elite around him at all. Bill O'Brien, it's a new offense, coming back from college to be the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. I get it. It's all new. But it seems like this New England team is ripe for a strip down. It's ripe for a reset. Now, defensively, they're fine because they always are. That's just the towel of Bill Belichick, the defensive schemes that he likes to run, and how he gets those guys prepared for every situation and every type of circumstantial moment they're ready for. But offensively, they can't execute. And so if the Bills struggle in this game, we're going to start asking serious questions about what their real viability is. And maybe that narrative that persisted last year, that they had missed their Super Bowl window, actually becomes louder, really loud.
Here's the question everybody on this platform wants to know. Again, Buffalo goes into this week, the biggest points of the week, 8.5 over the Patriots. I think there's another one at 8. Seattle over Arizona is 8. They did not cover it last week. Can they cover 8.5 versus the Patriots? It better be.
Last week was ridiculous. It was 15 and a half, I think, by game time. But laying 8.5 on the road. So New England is home dogs, which is something you're just not used to seeing.
I
especially not
never hear it said ever.
yeah,
It's
especially
like an
not by a
oxymoron.
touchdown anymore.
You can't even say that. You can't even say that with a straight face, but I mean,
Yeah,
it's the
but
reality.
I gotta tell you, I mean, as much as we're talking about this is a get right game for the Bills, I would tend to take the New England Patriots getting 8.5, right? Just because
Wow.
they play sound defense. And the
Yeah.
one thing that Bill Belichick does unbelievably well is look at what other teams have done that have limited an opponent, an upcoming opponent, and mimic it and mime it. It happened in that Super Bowl, maybe one of the ugliest Super Bowls that we've ever seen against the LA Rams and the New England Patriots, where they held them to 3 points. He had noticed that Vic Fangio's defense kind of frustrated and stifled the Rams, who were one of the best offenses in the last decade. And so what did he do in the Super Bowl? He did exactly what Vic Fangio did to the LA Rams. And so expect to see a lot of man coverage, a lot of, all right, Josh, you better make some tight window throws. That's the only way you're going to beat us. So to me, this screams of a field goal game or a 5-point game, not an 8.5-point spread like it's laid out right now. I would take New England. Early in the week, not in injuries and all that aside, I'm looking in New England at home as a home dog, getting 8.5. I think I'm taking Bill and the Patriots.
Now that was a complicated answer to an easy question, but I'm gonna take I'm gonna take 8.5, dude. Come on. You can't do anything. So from last week's game of the week, which I'm saying was Giants Buffalo, this week's game of the week. But without a doubt, the best game is Sunday Night Football. 8:20 kick, Miami Dolphins at Philadelphia Eagles. Tua Tagovailoa versus the man whose job he took, Jalen Hurts. Two number one offenses in the NFL, and I didn't even realize that until I started looking up, getting ready for this game. But it's not even close. The Philadelphia Eagles averaged 395 yards per game. The Miami Dolphins averaged over 100 yards per game more, 498 yards per game that the Miami Dolphins did, which is just ridiculous. I mean, obviously that's going to revert back to the mean at some point. I mean, you just can't score that many yards all year long.
When you have a 700 yard outlier, of course it's going to, and we
right, yeah, that's it. Well, but to their credit, Tua is leading the league in passing yards right now, which is not something I would have guessed 6 weeks ago, that the number one quarterback in the league would be Tua Tagovailoa. But the fact remains that it is. And Philly, of course, I mean, obviously they were undefeated coming into this week. 1.5 favorites at home. I think this is if there's a can't miss game of the season so far, this is definitely it.
Well, I mean, Alabama, I don't think has ever historically been a quarterback you. I mean, you got to go back to Joe Namath. But the last few,
right,
they're all starters in the NFL. And we just talked about Mac Jones.
Right? But we're talking about Mac Jones. You still talking about Mac Jones?
But the fact of the matter is he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. And then, obviously before him was Tua Tagovailoa. And before Tua was Jalen Hurts, who then transferred to Oklahoma and became one of the best dual-purpose quarterbacks, passing and running in the NCAA his last season at Oklahoma. Under Lincoln Riley, he was amazing out in Oklahoma. But, Alabama, I never would have thought would put out elite level quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think what I've kind of come to realize is that where you get drafted matters. And if you have the right coach that's going to nurture you the right way, you can do a lot of great things at quarterback. And Mike McDaniel has opened up Tua and maximized what his biggest strength is, which nobody would have guessed this coming out of college unless you watched him in college. His downfield, his plus 20-yard accuracy has been, since he came in the league, tops in the league by a lot. So his ability to throw the deep ball accurately is something that Mike McDaniel is taking a ton of advantage of. And you remember back when Tyreek Hill, forced his way out of Kansas City, and he might have come to the Jets, and he was flirting with, New York and Miami, ended up going to Miami. And one of the first things he said when he got to Miami was Tua is more accurate than Pat Mahomes. And people looked at him like he was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Pat Mahomes is the elite of the elite. But what we've come to see is that he wasn't lying, right? Tua Tagovailoa knows how to put the ball where it needs to be on time and accurately. And when you have speed that separates, these wide receivers from defenders, and I think Ronde, you can attest to this. When a guy runs at you as fast as Tyreek Hill does and can cut on dimes, it's impossible to defend him, right? And so, right, and so
there's a quarterback.
Tua gets the ball to his guys right when they come out of these breaks, and DB's like, "What the hell am I doing?" So Mike McDaniel has mastered the skill sets of his talent, both the quarterback and the wide receivers.
There's not a quarterback in the league that can outthrow Tyreek Hill. Let's start there. So his deep ball accuracy is going to be on point just because Tyreek can come under anything. But to your point, he's thrown for at least 250 yards, I think, in every single game this year. His average per attempt, which is a number that I hate talking about, but it's the highest in the league. It's 8.5 yards per attempt. And it's because the guy is not ever trying to make something happen that he knows can't happen. When a play breaks down, he has the fortune of having not one, but two receivers that have no problem turning up and making it a track meet, right? Whichever one of those guys he's deciding to throw the ball downfield to, know that it's coming to them as soon as the play comes out. So if the play starts, it's a 15-yard out, and the ball doesn't hit them at 15 yards. Their instinct is to turn and go. And Tua is he's just laying it up. And if you're a DB, and you see it every single week, you see DBs in perfect position, and then all of a sudden they're not, and they're getting run by. And you're like, what happened on that play? And the reality is Tua's bought 2 seconds, moved either way out of the pocket, and launched. And I think you mentioned it maybe week 1 or 2. It's definitely written into their offense that scramble drill is a takeoff. It's not find room and come back to the quarterback, make a DB get lost in space, like it was in Kansas City for Tyreek Hill. Their scramble plays were always push up field, come back, find some open space. Mahomes will find you. In Miami, Tyreek's like, let's go.
Yeah.
Hand up. I'm running. This guy can't run with me. Bye. So to your point, it's fun to watch, and that's why the numbers are, I think, so skewed heavily for Miami, is because how many attempts they make down the field. And I'd be interested. I'd have to take a deep dive in this. I'd be interested to know how many of them are actually called shots, versus how many of them are the 2 or 3 seconds that I bought to get a shot down the field.
So it's funny you say that, because it's a college thing. I remember KJ Hamler at Penn State, and one of two things: if they got man coverage and the quarterback could identify it and the wide receiver could identify it, it was just a go. They just ran a go. Forget what the route was. Forget if it was a slant, a dig, whatever, shallow cross. Forget it. If you notice man coverage, safety's not really in the play, just run a go. The other thing they would do, it was their sight adjust. If you bring pressure on there, you like, we got 0, right? There's no safety in there. The ball's got to come out fast, right? Run a slant or run a quick out or run a stop route, run something, right? Find the curl, whatever. What teams have started to do in college, and this is what you're starting to see in the NFL now with teams like Miami, the sight adjust is a go route, which is crazy to think about. But if everybody's on the same page, those things turn into massive plays, like 60, 70, whatever yard touchdowns, because it's impossible to guard speed, right? Speed was used to always be that thing, right? It's the variable that you can't account for. Speed kills. It's come back to that. And because they've legislated out contact, like you can't hit people anymore, you can't just decapitate wide receivers anymore. You get these smaller Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, burners who don't fear running across the middle or running into traffic, because they know they're not going to get hit. So it's changed the game in so many ways. But when we talk about the other side of this, Ronde, with Jalen Hurts was the darling last year. But Jalen Hurts is showing some let's call them warts. right? He's got 7 interceptions on the season already. The Jets forced him.
Leading the league in interceptions.
Yep, the Jets forced him into 3 interceptions. And, when you think about, what made him so good a year ago, it was, yes, he could find A.J. Brown. And yes, Devontae Smith was talented and they had a really good running game, him included. But it was because he made no mistakes. Him and Daniel Jones were the top turnover or lack of turnover players in the NFL at 1.1%. They led the league.
Right.
They just didn't turn the ball over. They didn't give the other team opportunities. And now you're seeing either defenses are figuring out or he's trying too hard to make plays. But Jalen Hurts has turned into a turnover machine. And that's why they lose to a team like the Jets, who can barely score offensively. But when you give them point blank opportunities and, lose the turnover battle 4-0, you're not going to win those games. So Jalen Hurts has got some leveling to do back to where he was a year ago.
Well, I think you could talk about Jalen Hurts in this situation, but also, the one thing that makes Philly as potent as they are or have been this season is their run game, right? DeAndre Swift, 10 carries, 18 yards last week. So it starts there, right? Because they've been reticent, I think, all year of making Jalen Hurts like their primary runner. He's always a threat to run, which makes the other running backs and other parts of the running game much more effective. What the Jets did last week to DeAndre Swift and Gainwell and Scott, who only had 2 yards, was eliminate that variable. And then you're putting it completely on the quarterback. Now, Jalen Hurts threw the ball 45 times. He had 280 yards. But like you said, when they turn into that game, you're able to force mistakes. And he's shown, at least this year, he's leading the league in interceptions with 7. He's shown this year, if you put that much on him, you give yourself a chance on defense to take the ball away. And that's why the Jets won this game. I mean, who's held Philly to 14 points this year? Nobody, right? They were more or less scoring when they wanted to at parts this season. You couldn't cover Brown. You couldn't cover Smith. Now all of a sudden, if you take that one element away, and I hate saying it, make them one-dimensional, but the reality is this is a team that doesn't play as well one-dimensionally as some of the other teams in the NFL. And the Jets figured that out this week. And so to this game, this 1.5 point Philadelphia Eagle game, Miami's going to have to play better defense than they have in the past in order to make that Jalen Hurts show up and try to upset the Eagles at home.
Yeah, 1-1, getting 1.5 on the road. The weather is probably going to cooperate. I honestly see this as a track meet. This is going to get
already.
No, but I just know in the Northeast, it's not bad. It's like 68 degrees today. So I'm assuming by this weekend, it's maybe going to be 63, which is perfect running weather. I'm hammer the over on this one for sure. And to be honest, I don't know if Philly can keep up. I would take Miami getting 1.5, even though it's on the road in the hostile. Well, let's call it what it really is, the not so hostile Philadelphia Eagles link anymore. It used to be crazy. The vet was crazy. The first few years of the link were crazy. It's really not that anymore.
Right. Love it.
Hey, man, we're changing the game. Help your bets stay hot this fall at Superbook Sports, the most trusted name in sports gambling with a direct line to Las Vegas. And now when you use promo code Ronde or Tiki, you score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, Superbook will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code Ronde or Tiki. Download the Superbook Sports app in Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Nevada, Ohio, Tennessee, New Jersey, or Maryland, and enter the promo code Ronde or Tiki, and you'll get $250 courtesy of Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, welcome to this last segment of Ronde and Tiki presented by Superbook Sports. This is the Ask You, Ask Me segment, and then we're going to get into a couple of games we're going to give you some lines on. Ronde, I'll go first. Who's the best backup quarterback currently playing in the National Football League?
Dude,
Should I
there's
give you options?
actually
Should I give you options?
well, there's a lot of them playing. Is what when you start looking
Gerard
at this
Taylor,
question, you're like,
PJ Walker, Gardner Minshew. I guess Zach is kind of, but whatever.
technically, yeah,
Malik Willis, forgot about him. Tyson Bagent and Josh Dobbs. Who do you like
right.
best?
Well, I'll tell you who I don't like. The rookie Tyson Badgett for the Bears. That's not really it. And Josh Dobbs is really not a backup because he kind of started the season. We knew that Kyler Murray was going to be out. But of these other ones, look, Tyrod's probably not going to play but another week. PJ Walker and Gardner Minshew, to me, are the two that you kind of got to look at. Gardner Minshew, he's interesting. They got a good. Who they played this week? They got a game this week that I was interested in. They play Cleveland, right? And they're home dogs. And Gardner Minshew's clearly the guy now because it appears Anthony Richardson's, at least according to Jim Irsay, is going to go on injured reserve. So now it's Gardner Minshew's show for the duration of the year. So of the best ones, like I wanted to say PJ because I was looking at them beating the 49ers last week, and it was just like a knee-jerk reaction. PJ Walker, yes, he beat the best team in football. Then I actually watched the highlights in the games, and it's like, yeah, PJ Walker didn't really do that much. So for me, I'm gonna say Gardner Minshew, Colts they're +2 at home this week. I mean, +110. I mean, do you really believe in Cleveland right now just because they won last week? I'm saying Gardner Minshew.
Well, it better be Gardner Minshew because Anthony Richardson seemingly is done for the season. Big loss for their rookie quarterback.
All right, my question. Ask me, Tiki. What has happened to the reliable running back
in the NFL? I think there's a couple of reasons here. Like for the young player, it's just because they don't know how to stay healthy. So Devon Achane is hurt, banged up his knee. I think they put him on short-term IR. He's going to miss 4 weeks. He's just young. He doesn't know how to do it. I think for the other guys, Christian McCaffrey got banged up. Saquon Barkley missed 3 weeks. Derrick Henry last year. I think this is just my theory. I think because they know they're not getting 20-something carries. They're trying to make mountains out of molehills. They're trying to take 3-yard runs and turn them into 40-yard runs. And so, in my day, it was, all right, that's a 3-yard run. You know what? You're going to get 15 more carries. It's fine, right? Just take it, move the chain, try to move the chains. But now they're trying to do so much that they're taking extra hits and it's compromising them. That's just the theory. But I don't understand how guys are getting less touches and playing less games. It doesn't make sense.
Montgomery.
Yes.
Right. Montgomery for Detroit.
Montgomery.
Right. Last week.
Same thing. Now, because I don't want to say they're just not tougher. They're just not as tough as we used to be because that's just insulting and demeaning. But
right. Tell them how you really feel, Tiki. Tell them how you really feel.
Bro, I had 400 touches a game, bro. I mean, a year. 400 touches a year. And I missed 6 games in 10 years, dude. So,
right.
And I'm not big. I'm little.
Right. I like your take. All right, games. All right. Games of the week. All right. There's some good ones. Very good. All right. First one, Detroit at Baltimore. Baltimore, this one's interesting to me because Baltimore, I don't think is a better team than Detroit. Yet they are 3 points favorite at home, and it's likely because they're at home. And to me, they're not suspect, but they're kind of borderline suspect. The Ravens. They don't look ever like a team that's gonna be dominant, right? They lost to Pitt, who is okay. They lost to Indy earlier in the year. Tennessee, if Ryan Tannehill doesn't get hurt in that game last week, Tennessee the game was interesting. The one that was overseas, the one in Tottenham. So I'm sitting here looking at this game saying the Detroit Lions, who have already certain are the toughest team in football right now in terms of physicality. Jared Goff looks like a really good version of Jared Goff right
Well, he
now.
looks like a franchise quarterback is what he looks like.
He absolutely does. And so they're they're dogs on the road. I get because of that. But the reality is, if I'm looking at this game and you got plus 140, I'm taking Detroit Lions right now. That
Yeah.
100%, I'm taking the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. So on the money line, if you're thinking of outright win, I love Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator. He's done a great job with this offense. They got running back issues right now because of the banged up nature of Dave Montgomery, but also Jahmyr Gibbs. He's banged up as well. So they could get a little bit one dimensional. But I like Detroit, plus 140 on the money line. Baltimore is interesting, as you mentioned, because Todd Monken has come and allowed Lamar to be a passing quarterback. And in fact, he's thrown for over 70% completion percentage in 5 of his games already this year. Money line, I'm going Detroit because I think they're gonna win on the road. And laying 3, if you're going, to me, it's also Detroit. This game is going to be close. I feel like this is a field goal game, and so give me Detroit plus 3, but also taking them on the money line. The next one, Ronde, the next one is interesting because of Jacksonville's, I don't know, up and down. They were in London for 2 weeks, right? They went and they stayed for 2 straight weeks, but they're on the road in New Orleans, who lost a game this past weekend.
Stayed for 2 weeks and didn't take a bye week when they came back.
Yes, exactly.
Playing 2 more games before their bye week.
That's exactly right, which is crazy, right? That's just it's not whatever. It's crazy that they found that they just putting that much taxing nature on their team. But my point is, the New Orleans Saints lost to the Texans last week, and look, Derek Carr was fantastic. He threw for over 300 yards. He looked great, but they lost that game. I don't know what to make of New Orleans, and I know they're home, and I know that they're a favorite, but I love what Jacksonville is. I love Travis Etienne, the versatility in this offense that he brings. And I gotta be real, Trevor Lawrence is just, he feels like he's still growing. And Doug Peterson, I think his ceiling is very high. So again, I'm going to take another road dog here. Give me Jacksonville plus 3 in New Orleans, because I don't know what New Orleans is.
Right. New Orleans is lost 1-1, lost 1. They're that team this year, right? And I look at this game and I say, are not the Jacksonville Jaguars the better team? And to me, the answer screams yes. The New Orleans just doesn't score enough points right now. And yes, the Derek Carr was out a week. They've had some up and down performances on offense. Their defense isn't quite as dominant, but this money line is the exact same as the game we just said before, plus 140. I'm definitely taking plus 140 with the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road, even though it's 3. I think the Jaguars with Etienne, who's, I don't know that people put him in a rare enough air of the really good running backs in this league. This dude does everything well. Run the ball, obviously, is a huge threat out of the backfield. And Trevor Lawrence is, I think, coming into his own. Of those young quarterbacks, the Herberts, all those guys that are kind of clumped there together, those 2 or 3 years of drafted quarterbacks, to me, he's likely going to be the best of the bunch. He's the most consistent. And yes, he has a lot of talent, and it starts with his running back. But to this game, I'm with you, Tiki. Give me the money line, Jacksonville plus 140, and I'll even take the points. I think Jacksonville, it goes in here and does even more damage than what the Houston Texans did to them last week. All right, last game. Talked about this briefly in our last segment, but Cleveland at Indy. Colts are home dogs versus the aforementioned PJ Walker starting quarterbacks. I don't think Deshaun Watson is going to be back this week. And if he comes back this week, then maybe it changes my mind on this game. But right now, Cleveland is minus 130 on the road. They are 2-point favorites at Indy. What do you think?
Yeah, well, so this is two backup quarterbacks, and it's really hard to judge games where you don't know what the quarterback play is going to look like. I guess Gardner Minshew, he has a little bit more of a track record, but PJ Walker is gritty, right? There's something about him. It was from a couple of years ago. We saw it. He's not, it's not going to ever be pretty with him. He's not going to ever stand back there and throw for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns and be statuesque and just like, that's not going to be him ever. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be like, all right, just get the ball to the guy, right? He's going to duck out there. It's going to look like convoluted. But when you're backed up with a defense that is dominant and not getting any credit for it, right? So they're as dominant as they've been. They're under the radar, which is nuts. But it's the reality of the Browns. And I think Indy is on the verge of a little bit of a spiral. And so I think they're home dogs for a reason. I like Cleveland laying 2 points here, -2 on the road. I think they win this one by a touchdown and maybe even more.
Well, to your point, and I know we in times past have disagreed. It seems like we're going to agree on all these games because Cleveland, you talk about their unheralded defense. We talked about offenses, the discrepancy between the number 1 offense in Miami Dolphins and the number 2 offense, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cleveland Browns, 200 yards per game total allowed. The next closest one, which is the Baltimore Ravens, is 260. So they are dominant in ways beyond what is showing up on game day. On paper, they are dominant. And with the backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew, who I just said was probably the best of the backups playing, I'm taking Cleveland too.
All right, that does it for episode 8, week 7 of Ronde and Tiki presented by Superbook Sports. By the way, if you're out in Las Vegas, go check out the Westgate. That's home of the actual Superbook. It's enormous and it's gorgeous, and you'll have a lot of fun. Tell them I sent you. They might buy you a drink. Tell them Ronde sent you. They definitely will buy you a drink. We'll see you guys next week.
The Ronde and Tiki podcast is produced by Superbook Sports. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Colorado, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, Ohio, and Tennessee. In Iowa, call 1-800-BETS-OFF or visit 800betsoff.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342.